Hello everyone, my name is Maggie, and my speech today will try to persuade you all to support the effort to both label and eventually eliminate GMO foods in the marketplace. As a mother, there are many things I must consider on a daily basis in order to both protect and nurture the development of my children. It is my job to keep them from harm and help them develop into strong, intelligent, and healthy adults. One thing that has always been of the utmost importance to me is the quality of the food that they are given. For the most part, they are only given organic produce, meats, and grains. But recently, I have discovered that I could have inadvertently been giving them genetically modified organisms in the few select times where I'm a little more lenient on what I give them. As there are no laws in the United States that require food companies to label their genetically modified foods. Though there are a select number of companies that voluntarily have their foods tested and labeled GMO-free, many of the largest food producers, such as Monsanto and General Mills, happen to be the ones that lead the fight against labeling the GMO foods. Have spent a huge amount of money and blocking the legislation that would require them to label these foods. As consumers, we have the right to know if the food we eat has been genetically altered in any way so that we can then choose whether or not it is something we want to put in our bodies. All food manufacturers should be legally required to label all foods so that consumers know what they are buying. To understand why GMO foods should be labeled, you must first know what a GMO is and what are some of the risks and benefits that are associated with them. According to the New Dictionary of Cultural Literacy, GMO is the abbreviation for a genetically modified organism whose genome has been altered by the techniques of genetic engineering so that its DNA contains one or more genes not normally found within it. The only produce that is legally allowed in the United States to be genetically altered and be sold is sweet corn, zucchini, yellow squash, and papaya, if it's from Hawaii or China. Although many packaged and prepared foods that are sold in the United States are allowed to have genetically modified ingredients in them without being labeled. According to an article found in Better Nutrition, the FDA doesn't conduct safety studies on GMO foods. It leaves that up to the companies that make them. The same article noted that tests have shown that in some cases, consuming GMO foods can cause immune system problems, gastrointestinal problems, and even infertility. However, because GMOs have only been in our food supply for a few decades, we cannot conclusively say just what the long-term health risks associated with them might be. There are even those who would tout their benefits. An article in Running and Fit News claims that GMOs can be extremely useful and that responsible science is the key to using genetic alteration in a way that benefits society's food supply. They would say that it is very difficult to feed 7 or 8 billion people without genetically modifying these foods, without giving any other options for us to have. Though in theory protecting our food supply from the inside out seems like a wise choice, there's just not enough evidence that it is safe for us long term. Many Americans support labeling GMO foods, but it is yet to gain the necessary traction. So why should we fight to label GMO foods? Though no food will ever likely be completely GMO-free, a large majority of Americans support the movement for mandatory GMO labeling. In an article from the Charleston Daily Mail, which was citing an Associated Press poll, they stated that 66% of Americans actually favor requiring food manufacturers to label GMO products. Only 7% were opposed to it, and 24% were neutral. Also, 4 in 10 Americans stated that the presence of GMO ingredients was extremely important to them and that they would like to know if they were in those products. This poll clearly shows that mandatory GMO labeling is supported by the majority of Americans, so why are there so few labels on products in our marketplace? This same article also states that the food industry and seed companies have aggressively fought attempts to force labeling and have pushed a bill in Congress that would block those efforts. If GMO foods were completely risk-free, then why are these companies fighting against labeling them? They maintain that there is no way to guarantee a completely GMO-free product and that these labels could mislead and falsely alarm consumers, as stated in an article found in Regulation magazine. These companies fight labeling because of the severe financial consequences they would face if it were mandatory. These higher costs would then trickle down to the consumer in the form of higher food costs. As consumers, however, we should be allowed to decide if we want GMO-free products and are willing to pay a higher price for them. We are essentially being refused the right to choose what we want to eat and what kinds of foods we want to avoid. If any part of the food sold to us could possibly do us any harm, the company that sells it should be responsible for divulging to us just what is in it, just as the tobacco and alcohol companies are required to do. So how can we as consumers avoid GMO products? Sorry. Okay, sorry about that. Though completely GMO-free products are few and far between, there are ways to avoid many of the GMO products in the marketplace today. Always look for a non-GMO product verified label, as these products have gone through the extensive testing that earned them that label. Also look for the USDA organic labeled products, as these are also required to be GMO-free. As we cannot know what the long-term health risks are in relation to GMOs, we should take these steps to ensure our future health. Also, by taking these steps, we may be able to create an environment in which food manufacturers are forced to either label or remove GMO products in the marketplace simply because we refuse to buy them. If we cannot pass the laws necessary for mandatory labeling, we must find other means to achieve our ends. In conclusion, though there is no way to know what the long-term health risks of GMOs are simply because they have not been around long enough for the proper testing, consumers still have the right to know what products are GMO-free and which are not. This can be done with a legally mandated label that identifies GMO-free foods and foods that contain GMOs. The majority of Americans do support labeling these foods, but the financial consequences that food manufacturers would face have led to a fight over mandatory labeling. If we as consumers make a concentrated effort to avoid foods that contain GMOs, perhaps we can force food manufacturers to both label GMO and GMO-free products and possibly even remove GMO products from the marketplace entirely. Thank you.